framing them, orchestrating them, directing other people, being in on the communications. And so once Trump made the decision to defer to Rudy Giuliani as the person who was setting the tone and giving people their talking points for what the approach was, that's when he decided to go after these nutty theories.
8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. We're checking the records of the cemeteries around Philadelphia.
During that period, Giuliani and Trump would repeat dozens of false allegations. And the committee believed they had evidence it wasn't an honest mistake.
Peter Baker, New York Times.
One of the things the committee did that was critical was putting together this timeline in which they showed very clearly the president would be told one thing one day, not true, don't say that, and he would go right back out and say it the next day anyway. That's really important toward, I think, establishing intent to lie, intent to defraud.
Each ballot went 3 times. Here's ballot number 1, here it is the second time, third time, next ballot.
Former Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue.
I told the president myself that these allegations about ballots going through the machine several times, it was not true.
In several counties in Georgia, there is clear evidence that tens of thousands of votes were switched from President Trump to Biden.
Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
So, Mr. President, we did a hand retally of all the ballots and compared them to what the machine said, and it came up with virtually the same result.
In Detroit, a vote dump came in unexpectedly. I'll tell you what's wrong. Voter fraud.
Former Attorney General Bill Barr.
And then he raised the big vote dump in Detroit, and I said there's no indication of fraud in Detroit.
Over 10,300 ballots in Georgia were cast by individuals who died prior to the election.
The actual number were 2. 2 people that were dead that voted.
You have Dominion, which those machines are fixed, they're rigged. You can press Trump and the vote goes to Biden.
I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines. I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations. I told them that it was crazy stuff.
Committee Senior Investigator Mark Harris.
Stretching the truth in a campaign ad or on a debate stage is one thing. But when you're using that lie to subvert the democratic process and to convince people that they need to overturn the election, now you're talking about conspiracy. And that's what he's charged with.
Trump wouldn't talk to the committee, but he did talk to NBC News.
September 17th, 2023.
The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
You hired them.
Sure, but that doesn't mean, you hire them, you never met these people, you get a recommendation, they turn out to be rhinos or they turn out to be not so good. In many cases, I didn't respect them, but I did respect others. I respected many others that said the election was rigged.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, oh, sure. It was my decision.
One of the allegations in the charges against Trump is that he used lies to carry out his criminal conspiracy.
The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans.
But to the president's defenders, his statements about the 2020 election, true or not, should be protected under the Constitution.
Susan Glasser.
You will see Trump and those who defend him essentially using the free speech defense and saying that these are just words. And in the end, it's not a crime in America to lie to the American public, even though Donald Trump lied to the American public a lot.
Former Trump attorney Robert Ray.
This is a central area of the president's defense. He does have First Amendment rights, and particularly as president, and trying to turn words into criminal conduct is a very slippery road for the prosecution under the First Amendment. And in the event of a conviction, I can guarantee you this will be point 1 in the brief on appeal.
Criminal defense attorney Ken White.
Lying to the government is not protected by the First Amendment. Obstructing justice is not protected by the First Amendment.
Ken White is a prominent criminal defense lawyer and a First Amendment expert.
And so here the government's position is going to be, we are not going after him for
what he said on the news. That's not the crime. The crime is that he specifically pushed to derail specific government functions.
From PRX.
Support for Pivot comes from Vanta. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Now, you can assess risk, secure the trust of your customers, and automate compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more with a single platform, and that platform is Vanta. Vanta's market-leading trust management platform helps you continuously monitor compliance alongside reporting and tracking risk. Plus, you can save time by completing security questionnaires with Vanta AI. To learn why thousands of global companies use Vanta to automate evidence collection, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews, watch Vanta's on-demand demo at vanta.com/pivot. That's VANTA.com/pivot to watch Vanta's on-demand demo.
Needless to say, you don't play favorites, but every family has a natural unspoken hierarchy. Longest legs up front, shortest kid in the way back, and the one with the best attitude, right smack dab in the middle. Sorry, buddy. The first ever Lexus TX is a 3-row SUV where everybody wins, with loads of elbow room, cargo room, and leg room. For everyone, no matter where they sit. This is a new era of 3-row luxury, the Lexus TX. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Hi everyone, this is Pivot from New York Magazine and the Vox Media Podcast Network. I'm Kara Swisher in Orlando and everything smells like a wet dog here. Scott, what the heck with Florida?
So one of the greatest kind of marketing moves is the Four Seasons Orlando and its lazy river. The hotels in Orlando could best be described as similar to San Francisco, expensive but bad. And it literally, you would go to some shitty hotel with a buffet that was $1,100 a night. And then the Four Seasons came in with their Four Seasons-like service. By the way, just a quick thing on the Four Seasons, I used to do some work for them. Their service is really, they realize like you can't differentiate on the actual hardware, right? Everybody has nice properties, or not everybody, but there's Almond, Rosewood, Ritz-Carlton. So we're going to differentiate on culture and service, and they hire people who want to be in that business for a career, as opposed to some good-looking, waiter or model that's looking at. But it really shows. I think it's a really impressive organization.
Yeah, I'm in a Sheraton, and it smells like a wet dog. That's all I have to say.
Well, there you go.
Disney World is nearby, so yay.
You know what I like? I like to walk into hotels that feel like where you would go to kill yourself.
Yeah, well, this as you can see from behind me.
I remember I was connecting through Montreal once, and I stayed at a hotel, and I was dating a Mormon girl who was very conservative, and we walked into the room, and she's like, "Oh my God, I hope they disabled the porn," and I'm like, "It's fucking regular porn, you weirdo." That's good. That's good.
Anyway, I'll soon be going back to D.C. I assume you've already read and tweeted my excerpt from my book today in New York Magazine. Probably you did.
No, I've been reading it over and over and trying to glean all the insight and subtext.
I'm going to support your book when it comes out.
Anyways, let's do a dramatic reading from your book.
We will, later, when it comes out, the 27th.
This happened, and I was right.
I was right. And again, I was correct. It's so sad how correct. Literally, would you do this if I was an athlete and I kept getting all the scores?
You're the LeBron James of hardware-loving tech journalists.
Let me just say, you wouldn't say that to a male athlete or someone else. He was like, nice work.
Because you're not a male athlete. You're a lesbian journalist, and that's fine. We can all be who we are.
I'm not speaking to you. Again, you're still not coming to my book party that you're throwing, correct? Okay, got that. I've gotten so many texts from people like, Scott Galloway's the host of your book party, he's not showing up, and I go, on fucking brand. They do. They want to see me.
No one cares. No one cares that I'm not going to be there.
People love us together. We're going to take a picture of us together at South by Southwest because we're the hot couple.
Everyone's disappointed when they meet me. I had coffee last night with David Haskell.
New York Magazine head.
He's so handsome.
Oh, yeah, he's lovely.
I mean, great editor-in-chief, fine, but most importantly, he's very handsome.
He's a handsome man.
I really enjoyed, I haven't spent that much time with David. You know he owns a whiskey distillery?
Oh, no.
He's literally the most interesting man in the world. He's the editor-in-chief of New York Magazine. He's been married, it sounds like he has a lovely partner for 20 years. And he has a whiskey distillery in Brooklyn.
And he's a very talented editor. He did a nice job editing my fantastic piece. Anyway, him and Genevieve is there. They're all great at New York Magazine, I have to say. We've got a lot to get to today, though, including Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers teaming up for a new sports app. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Scott. Tucker Carlson's, I'm going to put this in quotes, interview with Vladimir Putin. I call him Tokyo fucking Rose. And Adam Newman's attempt to
Report podcast feed or online at marketplace.org. Our executive producer is Kelly Silvera. Our digital producer is Dylan Mietinen. Our engineers are Jason Duhler and John Brewington. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio with our morning report. From APM, American Public Media.
It's a minute before 9 o'clock. This is 91.7 WVXU, the BBC News Hour. Coming up next on this cloudy Friday, the high today, 62, it's 53.
Support comes from family-owned and operated Ray St. Clair Roofing, with 70 years of providing greater Cincinnati and Dayton areas with roofing installation. Ray St. Clair Roofing is focused on being your home's trusted problem solver and your one-stop shop for all roofing, gutters, windows, doors, siding, and chimney needs. Online at raystclair.com.
Support comes from the Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services, helping people with developmental disabilities to live, work, learn, and fully participate in their communities. They support nearly 10,000 people each year, from babies to senior citizens. You can learn more at hamiltondds.org or 513-794-3300.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
Welcome to NewsHour. It's live from the BBC World Service in London. I'm Tim Franks. The US warns Israel about the dangers to civilians if it pushes, as expected, into the southern Gazan city of Rafah. Palestinians there say they fear the worst.
We are expecting them to come. Because if they come to Rafah, it will be the end for us. We are waiting the death.
Also, the slow but surprising election results in Pakistan. President Biden hits back at a legal investigation which questioned his mental faculties.
I'm old meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I'm the president. I put this country back on its feet. My memory is fine.
The former Fox News host Tucker Carlson has an interview, or is it an audience, with Vladimir Putin. And football's lawmakers have a plan to improve players' behaviour, the threat of being shown the blue card and sent to a sin bin. All that after the news.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Independent candidates backed by the jailed former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan have established a clear lead in the official vote count for Thursday's general election. They've won 52 of the seats declared so far. The party of another former Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif, who's seen as favoured by the military, has won 43. Caroline Davis is in Lahore.
Inside the headquarters of Nawaz Sharif's PMLN party in Lahore, supporters gathered for his arrival to the sound of drums and fireworks. The party says it already has enough seats to form a government. The same claim has been made by Imran Khan's PTI party. Candidates backed by Mr. Khan are all standing as independents because their party was not recognised by the Electoral Commission weeks ago. Independents have 3 days to join a party. The PTI will need to find a solution quickly as other political parties eye up their candidates, hoping they could be persuaded to join their ranks. Even Mr. Sharif's party have suggested that they might want to absorb some of them.
The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk says Haiti suffered its most violent month in 2 years of conflict in January. Gang violence has spiraled, and armed gangs now control many parts of the country. His spokesperson, Marta Hurtado, told a news conference over 1,000 people had been killed last month alone, and that children were especially affected.
The impact of this torrent of violence on children continues to be of particular concern. In 2023, 167 children were killed and injured by bombs. Some were executed by gangs or so-called self-defense groups for their suspect support for rivals. The recruitment of children into gangs remains extremely worrisome.
Prince Harry has agreed further damages in his case against Mirror Group newspapers in Britain. He settled his remaining claims of phone hacking and invasion of privacy. The amount awarded has not been made public. Here's Helena Wilkinson.
Prince Harry was not in court for today's hearing, but there is no doubt he will see this settlement as another victory. In December, the High Court ruled that 15 of 33 sample newspaper articles were the product of phone hacking or the product of other unlawful gathering. Harry was awarded close to £140,000. It left 115 remaining claims which Harry brought against MGN. Today the High Court heard that those had now been settled out of court. It avoids a further one or possibly two trials, which would have been extremely expensive.
Polish farmers have kicked off a month-long general strike, blocking roads and border crossings with Ukraine to protest to cheap imported products. They follow a 2-month blockade of the frontier by Polish truckers, demanding restrictions for their Ukrainian counterparts. BBC News.
Good morning. It's 9:04, 53 degrees in Cincinnati, 54 in Dayton. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Marianne Selesnik. A proposal that would require financial literacy courses already mandated in Ohio high schools to include lessons on capitalism has passed the Republican-dominated Ohio House. State House correspondent Karen Kassler reports.
Republican Adam Byrd said the bill doesn't require more time, just additional concepts regarding capitalism to be added into the financial literacy curriculum.
They include market prices constantly change based on supply and demand. It includes entrepreneurship and innovation positively affecting the free market.
But Democrat Joe Miller said it's an election year, there's a teacher shortage, and capitalism is already taught in history and government classes. So this is a good idea gone bad.
Because we want to continue here in the General Assembly with partisan messaging, ideological warfare, and a quick fix to a poorly constructed bill.
4 Democrats joined all Republicans in voting for the bill, which now goes back to the Senate to approve changes. Karen Kassler, the Ohio Public Radio State House News Bureau.
Autonomous vehicles are on the legislative agenda in Frankfurt under HB 7. The state transportation department would establish regulatory framework to allow autonomous vehicles on Kentucky roads. The bill passed out of committee yesterday. Testifying in opposition to the bill was Michelle Grubbs. Grubbs' son and 4 others died in a truck-related crash in Paducah in 2021.
Proven and safe solutions are needed in this time of crisis. And at this time, I don't feel we should be recklessly placing autonomous vehicles and trucks next to unsuspecting Kentucky motorists.
Jeff Farah with Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association said AVs enhance safety.
proposed by Governor Mike DeWine dealt specifically with how gender transition treatment would be conducted in Ohio and the data that will be collected on it, because there really isn't a whole lot of data on how many people are receiving this kind of care, and DeWine wants to know a little bit more about that. And these are rules that agencies develop. For instance, one set of rules is coming from the Ohio Department of Health, and that specifically deals with providers. And the other set of rules is coming from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, dealing with that end of the gender transition process. And the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services released their revised rules that basically, the big changes here were that these rules will apply to only trans youth, minors, not to adults, because there was a concern that it might apply to adults as well. There was also a question about the kinds of medical professionals who had to be involved. There's a shortage of some of those, so there were some allowances taken for that. And then the question about medical ethicists. Apparently in the rules, it was stated that medical ethicists would only apply to providers looking over all plans that providers are doing, not individuals seeking gender transition treatment. So the whole reference to medical ethicists was taken out. But the process is not over. This is just the start. We're still waiting on the rules from the Ohio Department of Health. The public comment period then opens up again. In fact, it's open for the rules that were just released this week. And then once there are final rules, there's a public hearing. So this is the process, and it takes a long time typically, but it's moving forward.
Well, and I believe there was some concern that these rules could apply to transgender adults too, not just transgender youth. How did that shake out?
Well, and when DeWine spoke to reporters about that a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, he specifically said that there were concerns about that there were lots of comments that the departments got, and that they were listening. And so that suggests that since they did take out the reference to, or did make it clear rather, that these rules only apply to trans minors, trans youth, and not to trans adults, that was a concern that they cleared up.
How do these rules relate to House Bill 68, if at all? Do they change the kind of care that transgender minors can receive under that law?
No, but what happens under House Bill 68 when it takes effect in April, assuming there's not a lawsuit, the ACLU has said that there will likely be a lawsuit, but they have not filed one yet. Assuming there's not a lawsuit, it takes effect in April, and youth who are going to seek gender transition treatment won't be able to, but minors who are currently in gender transition treatment, I'm told, can continue, though there are some questions about that as well. These rules don't really affect House Bill 68 in that it's going to go forward unless there's a lawsuit, but they kind of will work in tandem here in terms of these are rules on providers, and then the bill actually affects whether certain people can even get gender transition treatment, and the bill, of course, bans minors from seeking that.
I see. So these rules could change the types of care or the way providers provide care for current patients who could continue care possibly.
Yeah, and rules, this is a process, again, that we see quite often. I mean, when laws pass, even if they're voter approved, they have to go through a rules process so the state knows how to enforce them. For instance, there was a ban on indoor smoking many years ago, and when voters approved that, it had to go through the rules process to become a law, essentially. And one of the things that changed was that there would no longer be indoor smoking at some fraternal clubs, which some people were concerned about. They didn't think that the indoor smoking ban would affect that. So that's an example of how this whole process goes forward.
Well, I want to ask you about another healthcare-related issue, and that's this effort underway in the State House to cap the cost of insulin. How is this different from what the federal government already did in the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022?
That act specifically related to seniors who are on Medicare. And so it's about 4 million seniors across the country on Medicare who have their insulin costs capped at $35 through that Inflation Reduction Act. What this bill would seek to do is to try to, and there's two bills actually, would try to extend that to all Ohioans, not just the people who are in Medicare in Ohio. And the House bill is a little bit more detailed than the Senate version, but there are two bills here, and they are bipartisan. The House version would cap the cost of insulin at $35, but not just that, also test strips lancets, glucometers, all the things that people who are dependent on insulin do need, and would also cap some non-prescription kits that cost at $100 there. And I think it's interesting to note that these two bills, the House and Senate version, are both bipartisan. In fact, the House version specifically is sponsored by two people who are a Republican and a Democrat who both live with diabetes. So they are dealing with their own experience here. And the whole goal is to try to lower the cost for 1 million people who have insulin dependence in Ohio. But it's not the first time. Last General Assembly, 2 years ago, there were the same kind of bills. Two bills, Republican and Democrat-sponsored bill in the House and Senate, that would do this, and they didn't go anywhere. So we're waiting to see if these bills actually move this time.
Any talk or thoughts about why those bills didn't go anywhere the last time?
I think, there's quite often a concern about extending requirements on, say, insurers. We see that a lot. There's a lot of discussion about what insurers should pay, what they shouldn't pay, and that sort of thing. So you do run up against the insurance lobby when you start talking about some of these things. But certainly with the Inflation Reduction Act actually doing this for seniors, there's a hope that this time it will go forward. And I should say that this set of bills and in the last General Assembly, those set of bills were both bipartisan. There were two other bills that were proposed 4 years ago. They were not bipartisan. They were Democratic-sponsored only, but they didn't go anywhere. So while this sounds hopeful, there is still the possibility that neither of these bills will pass.
And you mentioned there are these two bills, one in the Ohio House, one in the Ohio Senate. You mentioned that the Ohio House bill is more detailed. Are there any other key differences between those bills that we should know about?
I think that's the main difference. In each of these bills, every time they come forward, they seem to have a little bit more information, a little bit more detail. And that's helpful when you're trying to understand exactly what these bills will do. Because a lot of times some of these bills are very, very vague. And vague bills typically don't pass, though they certainly can.
Have other states passed legislation like this? Is this measure modeled after anything another state has passed?
Yeah, 25 states have passed bills that cap these co-pays for insulin. And one sponsor of the bill, the Republican sponsor, Thomas Hall, who's from the Middletown area, said that they looked at West Virginia's bill to try to get that one passed for, because of course West Virginia, a very red state like Ohio, and he said this is a very simple bill, 2 pages, very similar to their bill. So it certainly sounds like he has some hope that it's going to go forward.
And what's next with all this? Where are these in the process? You mentioned there's been other legislation like this before that hasn't gone anywhere. How much farther does this have to go?
Well, the Senate bill was proposed a year ago. It's had one hearing, so don't know if that's going to move at all. The House bill was just proposed, so it has not had any hearings yet. So it's kind of a wait and see here. I mean, the legislature, again, is busy with the primary coming up. And so we don't expect to see lawmakers around too much until after the primary in the middle of March rather. But then they have till the rest of the year to pass these bills and anything else that's in the pipeline. At the end of this year, that's when every bill that's currently proposed dies and have to be reintroduced. So we still got time.
Okay. Well, I've been talking with Ohio Public Radio and Television State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Thank you so much for your time today, Karen.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks.
Up next, we'll hear about some of the iron workers who helped build the Brent Spence Bridge. This is Cincinnati Edition.
Support comes from Dupree House, premier senior living community, whose team of specialists can help with the resources you need to sell your home and guide you on what to take, what to sell, and what to give away. Dupree House focuses on you enjoying retirement living at its finest. For more information, visit dupreehouse.com.
Support comes from Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services, helping people with developmental disabilities to live, work, learn, and fully participate in their communities. They support nearly 10,000 people each year, from babies to senior citizens. You can learn more at hamiltondds.org or 513-794-3300.
The Golden Bachelor was a fan favorite. I'm Nora Stassi. My Dating While Great radio special explores the lives of older singles, including how we make love connections. Join me Sunday evening at 6 and Valentine's Day at 7 p.m. on 91.7 WVXU and WVXU.org. Brought to you by Cincinnati Public Radio. With so much news breaking every day, it's hard to keep up. But Morning Edition from NPR News has you covered with dispatches from abroad.
NPR's Rob Schmitz is with us now from Berlin to tell us more. Good morning, Rob.
And stories closer to home.
President Biden heads to Minnesota today to point to his administration's investments in rural America.
Let the Morning Edition team keep you informed. Join us every weekday.
With host Marianne Celeste on 91.7 WVXU. Support for Cincinnati Edition comes from the Johnson Foundation, a private grant-making foundation committed to creating a more vibrant urban core through community development and civic engagement. More information at johnson-foundation.org.
This is Cincinnati Edition on 91.7 WVXU. I'm Lucy May. We're turning now to two redevelopment projects in Greater Cincinnati that have very different price tags, but are both important to lots of people. Preservation of the King Records building in Evanston and the massive Brent Spence Bridge Corridor project. Joining me now to talk about the future of King Records and take a peek into the past of the Brent Spence Bridge is WVXU General Assignment Reporter Nick Swartzel. Welcome back, Nick.
Hey, Lucy, how's it going?
Okay, it's always so nice to see you in the studio.
Good to be here.
Great to have you. You've reported on the plans for the King Records building in Evanston. For those who aren't familiar, tell us a bit about the King Records legacy.
Yeah, so it's a very historically significant piece of music history, both in Cincinnati and really nationally. Started in like 1943 with country music and branched out into R&B and a lot of other genres. And you might know some names that came through there: James Brown, Bootsy Collins, Otis Williams. They got their start at King, so pretty significant. Also really significant in a civil rights context. One of the first kind of integrated workplaces, certainly in Cincinnati, but really in the nation.
Oh, fascinating. What's the plan for the building, just in general terms? I know it's not, I understand it's not quite set in stone yet.
Right, so Evanston leaders and historic preservationists want to see some kind of museum to the King Records history. They want to see a sort of community center that welcomes people in and is music focused. But beyond that, they're still trying to hash out exactly what that looks like.
Okay, so something to really celebrate that history in some way, but details TBD.
Right. I think something that engages the community as well.
Yeah. And city officials promised money to help, as I understand it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, in 2021, City Council set aside about $1 million to go to efforts to redevelop the site along the lines we talked about. That money has not yet been appropriated, but it's checks in the mail, I guess.
Any idea what the total project cost will be, or is it too soon to say what that would be?
It's really too soon to say. I think we're kind of in a chicken and the egg scenario where the King Records Legacy Foundation, they need some money to get the planning underway and also raise more funds. So until that's done, all the designs are kind of hashed out and the ideation of it, we really don't know what the project costs.
Sure. And I know that there's been with inflation lately, building anything has gotten a lot more expensive over the past few years. So what if you could talk to us? I know our colleague Becca Costello is doing some reporting on this earlier this week, and you've been following the King Records project for quite a while now. Tell us a little bit, as much as you can, about some of the procedural stuff that happened in council this week as it relates to this project.
Yeah, Becca did a great job reporting on this one, which I really hard not to mess up her work. So Monday, this past year, City Council committee, about $410,000 of the $1 million that was promised getting appropriated over to the King Records Legacy Foundation. But council members, a couple council members, Jeff Clemmerton and Reggie Harris, were kind of like, wait a minute, let's see, what are we doing here? So it got kicked back to committee Wednesday, and that committee will hear it again Monday. And I think what they're trying to do is set some maybe guidelines as to what the money's for. There's a little bit of concern that some of it's going to be used for lobbying and fundraising, and they just want to make sure that there are the right guidelines in place, is what it sounds like.
Okay. Sounds like we might hear more about all this next week.
Sounds like it.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's turn to the big project, or bigger project, I should say, this Brent Spence Bridge Corridor project that I I feel like I've been talking about it for 20 years. I don't know if that's just me feeling old, but our region is about to undertake this major project. You came up with the idea of talking to people who worked on the original bridge. What did you learn from that?
I learned that iron workers are really funny.
Tell us more, Nick.
I met 4 people who worked on the original Brent Spence Bridge, all doing iron work one way or another. And they were all very humble about it. And, I only built the piers that hold the whole bridge up. I don't know much about it. It's like,
pretty big deal, I think.
Yeah. You were like 20 feet under the bed of the Ohio River, like welding steel. That's not a big deal at all, is it? I also learned that it's a pretty intense and really dangerous job that these guys and others did, and it was fascinating. It was really cool to listen to them talk about it.
Yeah, well, and I want to allude to this, but you had to do some bleeping too, as I understand. They're fairly colorful characters.
I didn't do any bleeping. All the sort of like actualities or quotes that I have in the story are unbleeped, unedited. But there were a lot of cool things that I couldn't put in because of certain words that were used, like pretty regular.
Yeah, fair enough. These were men who did this work more than 60 years ago, as we said. Did that give you any kind of perspective or any hints about how that work might have changed? I mean, do you have any idea whether the different processes or some of the danger is going to be the same now as it was all those years ago?
So what I've read and heard is that bridge building, even at the time of the Brent Spence Bridge construction, 1961 and 1963, had already changed. Like, there are some ways they built the bridge, ways they riveted it together and things like that that just weren't even really used anymore in the 60s. And so that is the original VSB is kind of a throwback in and of itself. And so yes, the new process is going to be a lot different. If you want to know more about that, you're going to have to get an iron worker on, because it's outside my area of expertise.
Yeah, I would love to get those 4 iron work, but probably not live, based on what you've told me about their conversational style. How much pride did these men take in this work?
You know, it was really interesting, because at first when I asked, like I said before, they're like, oh, I only worked on this one part of the bridge, but you know, when you get talking to them about like, hey, this is still in the skyline and it's going to be here for a lot longer, they definitely got hyped up about it, and they were like, yeah, I'm so glad they're not tearing it down. There's nothing wrong with that bridge. It's going to stand up for, one guy said, another 100 years. And yeah, I think there's a sense of satisfaction that they take their families across that bridge all the time, and they help build it.
Yeah. How dangerous was their work? Did they describe it as dangerous?
They did, but I also think that they are really intensely concerned about safety. And they recounted a few incidents that happened that sounded pretty scary to me. And also safety standards were different back then, they pointed out. But they were also kind of like telling the younger guys, like, hey, be really careful.
Yeah, it's no joke. This
right.
is not... how much steel was involved in these support structures they were building? I mean, you talked to some people who were on the support structures, some people who were doing work higher up. You had some really fascinating details in your story on our website, wbxu.org, that talked about just how much steel went into this.
Yeah, so there's a difference here between